We turned to Vance Packard, the author who started in the 50s explaining us to ourselves, to help explain what it was about Elvis Presley. Did Elvis Presley come along and take advantage of something that was about to happen anyway?
Yes, I think that this was happening all along the line. Not only in music, but in sexual mores and the way that people dress. I mean, up until well in the late 50s, the gray flannel suit was still mandatory for men, and they had very strong ideas about even changing the buttons on a suit. And the women wore dresses, and there was only a narrow range in which they could raise and lower the hem. The idea of the woman's role was that she had the station wagon full of kids out in the suburbs, taking them off to school, and this was glorified all through America.
But Elvis Presley burst on a rather quiet, tame American scene. Did he actually help change things?
Well, he helped change the sexual mores in terms of restraints, I think. I think that he was a key figure in this. I mean, with his sensuality and his great bursting away from restraint and the way he presented himself in all of his songs. I mean, that was the biggest characteristic, and that gave the millions of people watching him, permission to break loose from the inhibitions that they'd had.
It wasn't just years ago, it was ages. When Elvis Presley got out of the Army in 1960, one of the reporters who sat down to interview him was a 25-year-old CBS News correspondent. Good heavens, that's me.
Elvis, you have some screaming fans out there. Do you still like screaming girls?
If it wasn't for them, I'd have to re-up in the Army, sir, I'll tell you.
Well, it was all so long ago.
Bright light city, gonna set my soul on fire. Got a whole lot of money that's ready to burn, so get those stakes up higher. There's 1,000 pretty women waiting out there. They're all living, the devil may care, and I am just a devil with love to spare. So viva Las Vegas!
Quite apart from his music, Elvis Presley seems to have built his persona from the movies he saw when he worked as an usher. Tony Curtis's ducktail, Marlon Brando's truculence, James Dean's vulnerability. When the collage was assembled, show business paid the ultimate tribute. In 1960, it made a Broadway musical, Bye Bye Birdie, about the Presley phenomenon. The film version followed 3 years later.
You gotta be sincere.
What's wrong?
You gotta be sincere.
Birdie, what are you doing?
You gotta feel it here, 'cause if you feel it here, well, then you're gonna be honestly sincere. If what you feel is true, you really feel it, you make them feel it too. Write this down now, you gotta be sincere, honestly sincere. Man, you gotta be sincere. If you're really sincere, if you're really sincere, if you feel it in here, and it's gotta be right off, baby. Oh, honey, hug me. I suffer. In everything I do, why my sincerity shows through. Yeah, I look you in the eye, I don't even have to try. It's automatic, I'm sincere. When I sing about a tree, listen, I really feel that tree. Yeah, when I sing about a girl, I really feel that girl. I mean, I really feel sincere. Why, if you're really sincere, if you're really sincere, if you feel it in here, and it's gotta be right out, baby. Oh,
from? Yeah, here we go now. Why you gotta be sincere? Huh? You gotta feel it here. Oh, my baby. Oh, my baby. Oh, yeah. Oh, my baby. Ah, yeah. Go, girl, go.
Angela! Angela, what are you doing?
Are you gonna be sincere? Are you gonna be sincere?
Yeah!
Are you gonna be sincere? Are you gonna be sincere?
Yeah!
Are you gonna be sincere? Are you gonna be sincere?
Yeah!
My baby, oh yeah. My baby, oh yeah. Are you gonna be sincere? Are you gonna be sincere? Oh, my baby, oh yeah. My baby, oh yeah. My baby, oh yeah. Oh, my baby. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Elvis Presley, we're told, didn't invent rock and roll, but gave it a style. He did more than that. He gave the world of show business a style. 20 years later, that style still nourishes the theater and movies and television. Without Elvis Presley, there'd be no Grease, a musical about the 1950s, which is the longest-running show on Broadway. The movie American Graffiti is about teenagers lost in the 50s. And television's The Fonz is clearly cast in the Presley image. After his death, people who knew him reflected on the man and the style that had such an impact on American life. Pat Boone, the singer whose career roughly paralleled Presley's in time, was a close friend.
Elvis really was just a simple down-home Southern boy, you know, from Mississippi and Tennessee. I don't think he ever really got to develop socially a lot because he had to live such a fugitive kind of life, and he kept the same little group of people around him all the time. He had to live behind bars or behind security guards.
Do you think his having to be in seclusion all of that time made him more generous, more outgoing when he could relate to people?
Yeah, but those seemed like acts of desperation almost, like trying to reach out and be involved with real people. But he was never with them very long. It was always just a passing thing. And so he'd give a guy a Cadillac to let him know that he really appreciated him, and I think it was more than that. I think he was trying to say somehow, gee, I'd like to have a normal kind of existence. I'd like to have a friend like you. I'd like to feel that I had a relationship with somebody that was not based on the fact that I'm the king and you're a commoner. And so I'm going to give you something to sort of demonstrate that.
Marlo Lewis was the producer when Presley made his stormy first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1956.
Well, we were electrified by, and he was electrifying, I should say, by the very gyrations of his body. He had a kind of a call of the wild, a sexuality, a sensuality, a lasciviousness to his music, and it communicated immediately to the audience.
Ready to rock and roll.
Mrs. Marion Koch, a nurse, cared for Elvis Presley when he was treated over the years at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis.
Elvis was not afraid of dying. He was a deeply religious person, and he read a lot up on astrology. He was very smart. As I said, he was not afraid to die.
George Klein was Elvis Presley's best friend in high school and a pallbearer at the funeral today.
We were friends, and I was always nice to him. And he never forgot that. He said that he always remembered.
What about this ring you have on your finger there now? Is that a good one?
He gave me that ring for my birthday. He gave me that watch. He gave me that bracelet. He gave me everything I had. The best thing he ever gave me was friendship.
The remarks weren't always so kind during Presley's lifetime. A movie critic said Presley was sensitively cast as a slob. A religious newspaper said Presley and his voodoo of frustration and defiance have become a symbol in our country. It was even written Mr. Presley has no discernible singing ability. That was written 400 million records ago.
My heart is growing sadder. That girl rejected me just when I thought I had her. Who wants to buy a heart? Oh yeah, one broken lover's heart. One broken heart.
Since his death, there's been so much talk about Elvis Presley as symbol, Elvis Presley's significance to our culture, that it's almost possible to forget that he played a guitar and sang. Whatever else went into the Presley legend, it began with his music. Charles Osgood reports.
It was an extraordinary sort of eruptive impact on American society. If you go back and listen to what was on the hit parade in the early 1950s in this country, it is appalling. It's like a time warp. I mean, but it was a time of extraordinary gentility and blandness and politeness. Presley was the man who codified in the American consciousness a kind of rebellion. And that rebellion was as much in the stage manner and inflections of the voice. I mean, that man could sort of shake his voice and suggest sex in a way that a literal readout of the words would never necessarily imply.
Well, it's one for the money.
The shaking voice and hips offended parents no end. Presley didn't invent rock any more than he invented sex, but kids seemed to think he'd invented both. And to the world of music, he became, to say the least, important.
You bet you he was, Charlie. He was immensely important. He was important because he was the first white man or woman to combine the basic elements of hillbilly music and rhythm and blues, and he became a kind of a rockabilly character, and with the seductiveness that was available to him, and especially at the time in which he was born, culturally, in our evolutionary process, he was a major and significant man. He changed the course of music, as I say, by introducing a shocking, at that time, a shocking kind of launch into the musical bloodstream.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.
You have to realize how insulting and crude and upsetting this was in a culture in which one expressed romantic feelings with moon-June platitudes. I mean, you ain't nothing but a hound dog. The use of the colloquial ain't. I mean, of course, this stuff had been going on in black music and in the scuzzier kinds of country music for years. But what Elvis's significance, apart from his musical gifts, which were in his formative years formidable as an interpreter, apart from that, he was the conduit through which these underground musics suddenly, and it was suddenly found themselves in the mainstream.
The style of Elvis Presley was influenced tremendously by black performers, and he, in essence, because of at that particular time, the kind of backwards mental capability that many people had, as judging a person because of the color of their skin is somewhat still does exist. But back then it was worse, and he actually, because of him being a Caucasian brother, he was able to do away with that whole thing.
When word of Presley's death came, there was a rush on his records. You can't even buy one here now. They're all sold out. But this store itself is a reflection of how much music has changed since the heyday of Tin Pan Alley. David Bowie, the Stones, the Band, the Kiss. The rock world as we know it today came into being when that explosive event occurred in the mid-1950s. Its name was Elvis Presley. Charles Osgood, CBS News, New York.
He gave away Cadillacs to total strangers. I know somebody he gave one to. Now that's success. Raw, garish American success. Success without limits. Success so grand and complete, as a critic named Greil Marcus once wrote, that there is nothing else worth striving for. The reports from overseas tonight speak of mourning rituals all over Europe. He was an idol over there, too. But it's hard to imagine Elvis Presley's success coming anywhere else but here. He molded it out of so many American elements, country and blues and gospel and rock, a little Memphis, a little Vegas, a little arrogance, a little piety. Greil Marcus says Elvis Presley's strength was nothing less than a rich and commonplace understanding of what democracy and equality are all about. No man is better than I am. He was a truck driver's boy from Tupelo who got so rich he could give away Cadillacs. That's an American story. How could we ever have felt estranged from Elvis? He was a native son. This is Charles Kuralt. Good night.
This has been the CBS News Special Report. Elvis.
Are you lonesome tonight? Do you miss me tonight? Are you sorry
we wish to thank Columbia Pictures for the use of Bye Bye Birdie and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer for the use of excerpts from several films. These CBS stations provided news, film, and tape for this broadcast.
To summer day when I kiss you and call.
He hit the big time, singing and swaying on the Ed Sullivan Show for millions of viewers who were either shocked and outraged, mildly stimulated, or hopelessly in love with him. Tonight, the Ed Sullivan Theater on Broadway in New York is dark and empty, but his memory, folks, is alive and well.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing, let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spider-Man played it in a saxophone. Little Joe was blowing on the slide trombone. The drummer boy from Illinois would crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple gang. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Number 47 said to number 3, you the cutest jailbird I ever did see. I sure would be delighted with your company. Come on and do the jailhouse rock with me. Let's rock. Go, go, go! Everybody, let's rock. Lay it on me, Daddy-O! Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Rock, rock, rock. Rock, 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 rock. Rock to the jailhouse rock. Rock, 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 rock. Rock to the jailhouse rock. Sad sack was sitting on a block of stone, way over in the corner weeping all alone. The warden said, hey buddy, don't you be no square. If you can't find a partner, use a wooden chair. Rock, rock. Everybody, let's rock. Rock, rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Shifter Henry said the bugs, for heaven's sake, no one's looking out a chance to make a break. Bugsy turned to Shifter and he said, nix, nix, I want to stick around, I want to get my kick. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the wholesale block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Dancing to the jailhouse rock, 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 rock. Dancing to the jailhouse rock.
ABC News presents Elvis, Love Me Tender. Now in New York, here is Geraldo Rivera.
Good evening. Sad tidings tonight. Elvis Presley, late of Tupelo, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Las Vegas, and Beverly Hills, died today. He was only 42 years old, but while he lived, he revolutionized the music business, and in one way or another, he touched most our lives. He was a truck driver in the early 50s who thought he could sing, and when he did at county fairs or at rinky-dink theaters in small southern towns, he made the crowds go crazy. The smart guys in the music business spotted him, signed him, and made the name Elvis part of the American folk history. Well, Elvis died today in the town he loved most. In Memphis, several men close to Presley in the last days held a news conference after a hospital spokesman described what happened to the 42-year-old singer.
Procedures, and the Memphis Fire Department ambulance continued these cardiopulmonary resuscitation procedures all the way into the emergency department. There will be a post-mortem examination done. The physician feels that the indication is that it's a possible heart attack, but we won't know until that examination has been completed.
Well, he was upstairs in his bedroom, and I went upstairs to talk to him. He wasn't breathing when I got up there.
Was he lying on the bed?
Yeah.
Has he been despondent over anything or anything?
I have no idea. They were getting ready to do a tour starting tomorrow, and so he was in a very good mood, very frank.
He was in a fantastic mood last night. I talked to him last night when we discussed some songs we were going to do on the tour and everything. He was in a great mood.
None whatsoever.
How do you feel about this?
I can't believe it.
I could,
it's not real.
No, it's not. It's our friend.
Elvis is dead, but this program won't be his obituary. Rather, this is a tribute to the man who brought passion and sensitivity to the world of rock and roll music. We begin with a look at his beginnings. He was a dusty truck driver, and actually his voice wasn't that bad, a mixture of country blues and pop. After touring the Southern County Fair circuit, where he usually had bottom billing, the man from Mississippi began to catch on and sell records. Said one newspaper woman in an early article, "I don't know what it is, but he's got it. He moves, he struts, he shakes, he's mean, he's sweet, he's sex." Well, whatever, by the end of that year, Elvis was a giant hit. In the late 50s, the Army, a 2-year tour. The famous hair was cut, but the style unchanged. Elvis was in Germany, but his reputation, his fame survived, and his career really wasn't interrupted. While in Germany, Elvis met a girl, the daughter of an Air Force officer. Ever since Elvis first staggered the teeny boppers of America and made their adolescent blood run wildly in the mid-50s, he's proven to be one of the most enduring performers in the history of show business, thrilling boys and girls even as they grew up and approached middle age. With his dozens of movies and hundreds of records, he's managed to accumulate an incredible legion of fans throughout the world.
That feeling goes through my toes and all the lights go out, go out. Whenever I see those eyes of blue smiling up so shy, I'm in such a spin, I take a ride off and fly. So let me, honey, let me do what you know I love to do. I'm so drunk with love and all I see is you. Let me have another dance with you.
Double Trouble, which is one of his first attempts at serious movie making, was unsuccessful. Actually, it was almost a parody of a rock star trying to be a serious actor. But still they came, his public, accepting him, however wooden the performance. And there were actually some pretty good films, I think. Happy, escapist movies, of love and of life.
Watch the wine.
The first record to sell more than 1 million copies was an Elvis Presley record. From then on, he couldn't fail. Throughout his career, more than 400 million records were sold overall, nearly almost 500 million, actually. In 1967, marriage to a lady named Priscilla Beaulieu. He fell in love with her in Germany, as I said. The marriage broke the hearts of millions of young girls around the world, but Presley, for really the first time in his life, seemed happy. In the early 70s, 1973 it was, at Madison Square Garden in New York, he held a news conference to announce his comeback. Rather, it was an emergence from semi-seclusion. And he held that news conference with his manager of 22 years, Colonel Tom Parker. The kids who knew Elvis in the 50s, whose parents argued about whether his pelvis was too frank, too sexual, had become parents themselves, but they were ready to really appreciate him. Then he had that major concert, almost a rebirth in Hawaii. In the world of popular music, as Andy Warhol once said, everybody is famous for just 15 minutes. Everybody, that is, except the truly great ones. Before the Beatles, there was Crosby and Sinatra, and there was Elvis. Tonight in Las Vegas, television's music historian Dick Clark talked about the man and talked about his music. Here's that clip from Dick Clark.
It's a surface analysis because we were not intimate friends. We knew one another. Last time I saw him in person was a couple of years ago at the Hilton. He came in to see our show one night, which was, you know, when you see what the man can cause, man never went anywhere without a coterie of friends, bodyguards and so forth. Everybody in that room, for the moment they knew, all the performers knew he was going to be there that night. You never saw 10 or 15 or 20 professionals get so nervous. But one man was in the room. Now, the nice thing about it was when it was announced that he was there, he came and he spoke on the microphone, and nobody went over to the table, nobody bothered him, nobody bugged him. They had that much respect for him. But I've often thought he was a caged animal. I digress there to remind myself of that time, but you don't want to live that way. It's got to do crazy things to you. He was not happy in the last few years, and that was made me very unhappy that he was.
Well, in recent years, the newspapers have been filled with gaudy personal stories about Elvis. He was paunchy. He was over the hill. He was into drugs. But before the glossy gossip and before the tabloid speculation, there was the music. There's always the music.
You don't like crazy music. You don't like rockin' bands. You just want to go to a movie show and sit there holding hands. You're so square. Baby, I don't care. You don't like a hot rod racing, driving late at night. You just want to park where it's nice and dark. You just want to hold me tight. You're so square. Oh, baby, I don't care.